First of all, welcome. Thank you all for being here. I think it's going to be a very interesting chat. We've talked a bit about everything before, and seeing the number of hands that went up of people that actually played Pokemon Go, we have quite a lot of interested people in the audience.
Cool.
So, just to start off, I think, so what we saw with the hands is that everyone knows about Pokemon Go. It's obviously a very successful game. But Niantic drew the experience to build Pokemon Go from a game you built earlier, a game called Ingress, which probably not as many people know. And I think that kind of gave the basis probably for building Pokemon Go.
Yeah.
So I'd like to go a bit into that. So maybe you can tell the audience what Ingress is.
Sure. So Ingress was one of two apps that we worked on at Niantic when we were still within Google. A brief history on Niantic. Niantic is actually the fourth startup from our CEO, John Hanke. He had two gaming startups in the late 90s. His third startup was a company called Keyhole, which was acquired by Google in the early 2000s and became Google Earth. And the fourth one was Niantic, which was actually created as an autonomous unit. This is in the pre-alphabet days, kind of 2009, 2010, to basically experiment with this notion of what are the kind of things that we can do on top of the Geo stack, because John was heading up product within the Geo division at Google, and Niantic was born out of that. And so that's where we came from. We created two apps to try to see what was possible. And the first app was an app called Field Trip. Had some success and worked with publishers to get hyper-local content that was triggered when you were walking through an area, trying to encourage a lot of serendipity and discovery. But the second app was the one that we really kind of started to focus on, was a game called Ingress. And Ingress is basically built on top of Google Maps. We started off in late 2012, invite only, Android only, some of our Google bias showing there, but just to see if we could, essentially a proof of concept. And we learned a lot on Ingress with regards to, will people even get off the couch, go outside, and play games? So, and so far, we discovered in those early years that they would. So, although it was kind of funny at first when people would first boot up the game and they'd see their avatar and they'd be like, how do I move? And then we'd have to explain, like, no, you actually have to get up and move to actually play the game. So, so good early learnings in 2013 on that.
Maybe for the people in the audience, you could explain just really shortly what you do in Ingress.
Yeah, so it's basically kind of a game of capture the flag meets risk. So you go out and try to control territory. There's over 5.8 million locations in Ingress. These are all points of interest. They have a couple of criteria that are common. They are basically pedestrian accessible. They're safe. They're based on either areas of cultural relevance, historical significance, maybe creativity. So a lot of public artwork in cities, museums, places of historical relevance like the Route 66 in the United States or some of the amazing cities in Europe are all locations in Ingress. And in fact, if you boot up Ingress, there's a lot of great Ingress portals right here in Amsterdam because it's obviously a gorgeous city with a lot of history.
Cool. And I think, so one of the strong points of Ingress, and that's something that you've seen in the stories that have been profiling the game, is that it has a very, very loyal user base, an extremely loyal user base. Yeah. I mean, how did you start building that?
Yeah. I mean, it was definitely, the marketers in the room will appreciate this. It's brick by brick, right? I mean, you have to build a beachhead audience that is very passionate and loyal. We brought a few pictures along to show you some of the passionate fans of Ingress. But what we really did was actually start with them to see, do you even like this experience? Are you having fun going out into the real world, trying to capture territory for one of two teams? You're either on the blue team, the Resistance, or on the green team, which is the Enlightened. And we discovered over time that the answer was yes. And one of the things we did on the marketing side to really help enable that community and help get people playing together was doing a lot of live events. So that was one of the key things for us to help bring people together, was to basically take our game board, which is basically the world, identify clusters in certain cities, time box it, and then do live events where at the end of a 4 or 5 hour period, there would be a winner. Either the blue team would win or the green team would win. And this started off in a very kind of small, humble way in the Midwestern United States. We had about 45 we call them agents in fiction in Ingress. They showed up in the rain, kind of, I think it was in March. And over time, and we just brought a couple photos here, these events started to grow and to grow. And really what we discovered was there's a lot of fun gameplay features in Ingress, but what really made it special was the relationships. And of the 3 pillars of Niantic, which are around exploration and discovery, getting a little bit of fitness along the way, kind of healthy lifestyle is what we call it. But the 3rd pillar of the company is around real-world social. Social networks are so powerful, and they're a way for us to communicate. But the importance of getting back to like real-world social. I'm here with Alejandro, looking him in the eye. We're having a shared experience, out in some beautiful places all around the world. That's what we're really trying to capture. And I think as some of these other photos show, it really started to take hold. So pretty exciting for us as a company.
Was it also the reason? I mean, so these pictures, they all look very. The people, they're very together. Was it also kind of the reason that the Pokemon company came to Niantic and said, okay, we want this, but with Pokemon in the real world? Was that?
Yeah, the origin stories of Pokemon Go are interesting. I mean, I think first and foremost, from a technology standpoint, it's important to know that it was a long journey, right? Like I said, invite only with Ingress, Android only. We didn't even launch on iOS until July 2014. And that's not because we didn't, want to get to the other, half of the addressable market globally, but it's because we were really trying to fine-tune on the tech side, on the customer support side, on the marketing side. Like, what's the way you go to market with something like this? The closest analogy we have in the gaming industry, because I'd worked at Electronic Arts for over 11 years, is MMO games. So I'm sure there's a lot of World of Warcraft fans in the audience or other types of MMO games. That's probably the closest analogy that there is. But the power of our mobile devices to enable this to happen actually in real time, in the real world, 24/7, always going. This portal over here could be controlled by the Resistance today, but it could be taken out by the Enlightened team within 30 minutes. So that kind of real world nature of it made it pretty unique. And it was one of the things that provided the foundation for Pokemon Go. One of the fun stories that I heard when we were first talking to the Pokemon company before we did the commercial agreement while we were still within Google was that Mr. Ishihara, the CEO of the Pokemon company, was actually a very high-level Ingress player.
Really?
Yes. And in fact, his wife was an even higher-level Ingress player. So he shared pictures with us when they'd be out walking their dog in Tokyo and taking out portals together. So that had a part to do with it. Also, we did some Google Maps partnerships with them where, you may remember this, it was an April Fool's joke a few years ago where you could go out and find Pokemon through Google Maps. And so those are some of the different parts of the origin of that project. Yeah.
And was that kind of, so they knew about Ingress and did that, was it that kind of the real world aspect more, or kind of the community aspect more that brought the two companies together?
I think there's a few things. I mean, number one is we were big fans of them. I mean, what an amazing IP. Just celebrated its 21st anniversary. They've done a great job of shepherding that. Talk about rabid fan bases. I mean, we're very proud of the Ingress fan base, but the Pokemon fans are alive and well and as rabid as you'll ever find. So I think there was a shared kind of mutual respect among the companies for what each of them were doing. I think that's part of it. But I think for them it was probably one of those things where it's another way to try to experiment and do some new things. And we'd been able to prove some things out on the gaming side with Ingress, and so it served as a nice lead-in for that. Yeah.
So obviously Pokemon Go was a huge success from its very first day, which I think July 2016 was when it launched. Do you know a bit how the Ingress community reacted to that sudden success? Was there kind of maybe jealousy in that we've been playing this a long time and now all these people are playing Pokemon Go, which is basically the same game, but
yeah. They were generally supportive. I mean, the truth is the Ingress community stuck with us through kind of a big transition for the company. So we transitioned out of Google to spun out to be independent in October 2015. Pokemon Go, as you mentioned, shipped July of 2016, so about 9 months later. And now, we're coming up on the one-year anniversary of Pokemon Go. The Ingress fan base has been very patient because we've obviously, since we are a small company, we only spun out of Google with 35 people, believe it or not, and we're about triple that now. So we're still very small and very focused. But the good news for the Ingress fans is that their patience is going to be paid off because we are going to be investing in that, and we have some really exciting changes coming to that product at the end of the year. So we couldn't be there without them, though.
There's some cross-pollination between Pokemon Go and Ingress?
There's a lot of Ingress players that play Pokemon Go, absolutely. But as evidenced last summer, you know, Pokemon fans are a very large group. I think we were all pretty pleased, both at the Niantic side and within the Pokemon company, of not just the active Pokemon fans, but, and I don't know if any of the folks in the audience qualify here, but there's a lot of folks, you know, kind of mid-late 20s, maybe early 30s, that actually had fond memories of Pokemon, maybe playing it, you know, one of the handheld versions or playing the card game, and maybe you hadn't engaged with it, but now you've all got these amazing devices. The IP is incredible, and maybe it was an opportunity for you to get back in, you know, some nostalgia there. Maybe what some of the old guys like me used to have with companies like Disney and that sort of thing. So.
Yeah. Yeah, and obviously, so you mentioned working with a different IP. Ingress is something that you built completely yourself. Pokemon, that was an existing property, so it had all these, you know, existing kind of a world that you had to work with. Was it hard to kind of port over the community building aspect of Ingress to this new IP in Pokemon Go?
Yeah, I think it's not so much that it was hard. I think there was a cultural shift for the company within Niantic, and that is that John and the core engineering team, who he basically worked with, you know, within Google Maps, at Keyhole, and that sort of thing, we were used to building our own things. And so the way I would answer that question is basically, it was a transition for Niantic to move from working on kind of quote-unquote first-party things that we wholly owned, to working with a third party. Because, you know, to their credit, like I said, you know, amazing brand, 21-year history, you know, they have their own kind of brand guidelines and ways that they kind of like to market, tone of voice, you know, those sorts of things that are really, really critical in your marketing communications and anything you communicate in the product. So we've done a great job, I think, of partnering with them, but that was a transition for us. And I think in the early months of Pokemon Go, we got some criticism, frankly, for maybe our lack of transparency and not maybe being as communicative. Of course, that was also, you know, contributed by the fact that the servers were melting and we were fighting fires with the Google Cloud Platform team to get everything up and running, which they did a great job with. But yeah, so that was a big learning curve for us, and you know, I think we're hitting the ground running now.
Yeah, and so maybe another difference between Ingress and Pokemon Go is that Pokemon Go saw a huge spike in users, of course, when it came out. And I think that dropped off after a while a bit. But Ingress is more of a kind of steady, you know, steady performing game. Does that also change the way that you think about kind of involving the community or involving the gamers that are playing it?
Sure. I mean, you're right about the drop-off with Pokemon Go. But we did share about a month ago that we're still at 65 million MAUs, so we're good with the numbers. And you know, the great thing about these types of experiences, and the developers in the room will appreciate this in particular, you know, you're only as good as your last set of features or new content or releases, right? You have to continue to innovate. And so, you know, they hold us accountable, as they should, right? So we have a lot of work to do, and we have more features that we're working on that are coming. One of the great things people were so excited about, we released over 80 more Pokemon into the game back in February. That's one example, and that's more of a content type of example that we did. But you know, things like new game loops and that sort of thing. John Hanke, our CEO, has intimated that we'll be working a lot on gym battles and improving the gym experience. That's kind of the second core game loop after just the basic capture mechanic in Pokemon Go, and we know that we need to improve there because it's only a small percentage of our user base is currently engaging in those gym battles, and we've got to make it better. So they keep us honest. So the community keeps you honest, basically.
Yeah, and are you planning to do kind of similar meetups, maybe, you know, in real life, that you have sort of events within Pokemon Go that they go to a certain place and?
Yeah, I mean, we've done some just very small things in Japan and a small event in Charlotte a couple weeks ago. So we're testing the waters there, but you know, we want to make sure we do it in the right way based on both our expectations and some of the success we had with Ingress events over the years and the Pokemon company's expectations. So you can expect to hear more from on that, but nothing to share today.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I think in the past year or so, and especially after the launch of Pokemon Go, augmented reality has become kind of a hype. So it's a word that you hear more and more. I mean, Microsoft with their mixed reality and, you know, all the new VR platforms that are around. But I think Ingress was one of the first kind of real successful games that use AR in a real-world manner. And how do you see this hype around that now, being part of the first wave maybe of that?
Yeah, I think that what we loved about Pokemon Go, and I think what's good for the industry about Pokemon Go is it's probably best described as AR light, because we had some basic AR camera functionality and features. There was a lot of social sharing when people were out capturing their first Pokemon last year. But you think about what's coming, there's been just some amazing announcements just even within the last month. You see what Facebook's doing, what Snap's doing, Google, Microsoft. I mean, everyone is kind of leaning into this. And so we're excited to have an application, even if you want to call it AR Lite, that is actually showing what's possible. But the best news for us is, and I think also for other developers out there, you don't have to wait until all that new hardware, if it's like headsets or other types of things, come. One of the things that I think is also giving us some good learning is, and maybe just a reminder for the industry, is that AR doesn't just have to be, the headset thing. That will probably be a primary use case, but we did some early work with Nintendo. We created a device called the Pokemon Go Plus. Very simple device, so you put it on your wrist or on your backpack, and it would just, it would give you some vibration and haptic feedback with regards to if a Pokemon was near, you could capture, and then when you got back, maybe from a walk or a run or that sort of thing, you could check, because it was Bluetooth tethered to your phone, pull your phone out, which Pokemon did they catch? We also did an integration with Apple on the Apple Watch. And one of the things that's important for us as a company is this notion of getting people out and about and walking. And this is probably one of the great things about the Apple Watch integration, is that it allowed us to basically tie in with kind of their core OS and do things like tracking the miles or the kilometers rather that you walked while playing the game. So I think those are the combination of just the base use case, using the mobile device, plus some of these other things we've tested with Go Plus and Apple Watch are indicators of the types of things that are possible. A lot of people forget this, but we actually did an early integration with our Field Trip app, one of the early apps we did, with Google Glass. And so even though Google Glass didn't have the type of commercial success and adoption that maybe some had expected, there's still a lot of good learning within the company, and we'll take those bits and pieces and apply them to
the
future peripherals and that sort of thing as they come out.
So how do you see the future of AR and MR in real world games? Are you working on any new things?
Well, I mean, we are working on new things with our existing products. I mentioned rebooting Ingress and continuing to add new features and content to Pokemon Go. As it relates to AR on MR though, I think we fundamentally believe, I used to make a joke about VR had a really good publicist, like 2 years ago, because it was getting all this attention. But we were just kind of slowly, toiling away thinking, it's really more about using data and having it enhance things that are in the real world. It's something that John's always believed in since day one. And I think we're starting to see kind of that shift, now. And so I think that, there's still a lot of chapters to be written, but I think it's got a lot of potential. And we could see a place where those things start to emerge, because I mean, some of the VR experiences out there are amazing. I mean, you can't argue with how immersive they are. But I think from both an end user standpoint and probably even in some B2B areas, the notion of using data and enhancing something that's in the real world, whether it's here on this table, or if you're looking at a landmark, or maybe in some other kind of a corporate environment where you could see, kind of using data to enhance what you're actually doing in the physical space is probably going to have a little more legs. I'll leave it at that. Yeah.
Exciting times. So we have a few minutes left, and I think maybe for people that are, there are probably some people at least here in the audience that are working on, building this kind of community feeling for their users. Do you have any tips or tricks or hints about best ways to do that? Yeah,
I think the biggest thing, and I think most people know this, but it's hard work, and that is just you have to engage with the community. So, one of the things that we were proud of on Ingress and that we've recently started making more progress on, there's a couple handles, Niantic George and Niantic Indigo, which are two of our new presences in Reddit that are, you're taking that community head on with regards to, if you go in and you want to engage, you're all in, right? So you have to engage with them. So our Niantic support group, partnering with my team, is there. And it's one of those things, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I would encourage, community managers and teams to take that on. We've also got a presence on Twitter, Niantic support at Twitter, where we can start to do direct replies and answer people's basic questions and that sort of thing. So I think that's the biggest thing. But also is get out there. I mean, one of the great things that we love about our live event strategy, it's not the most scalable thing from a marketing standpoint, but it's a great way to stay in touch with your community because you're, again, this personal eye to eye. I can hear you. I can listen to the concerns. Maybe hopefully, get a couple things of, hey, and we like this, so keep doing more of this. It's not all just, trolling and hate. It's also a lot of really positive things that we pick up. But you have to have a little bit of a thick skin, but it's really important. So.
Perfect. I think we're more or less done.
Okay.
Then.
Great.
Unless anyone might have
Alejandro.
a question, might yell a question. We have a minute left.
What is the next version going to be?
There's the gym mechanic is something in Pokemon Go that we really want to improve. So that's going to be the next big area for us. The capture mechanic's fun, but you're a lone wolf. You're going out there on your own. Maybe you're with friends, but there's not that kind of connected experience. We think there's an opportunity for collaboration in that area, but more to come on that.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Mike.
you very much, Alejandro. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.